Inside Pelican Bay Prison. Dark secrets of solitary confinement exposed. True crime documentary. The Soundproof World. If you think this story is already intense, hit subscribe and stay until the end, because what you're about to hear has been buried for decades. The camera would pan across the razor wire perimeter of Pelican Bay State Prison, but our story begins inside in a place the inmates call simply the box. Officially it's the Security Housing Unit, or SHU, a concrete labyrinth carved into California's northern coast. From the outside it looks like any high-security prison. Low gray blocks, guard towers, lights on tall poles cutting through the morning fog. But inside, the air itself seems different. Dense, muffled, as if sound gets swallowed before it can echo back. For decades, Pelican Bay has been both fortress and laboratory for America's harshest confinement practices. At its heart is a 1,200-cell complex designed to isolate prisoners 23 hours a day with no physical contact, no work, no programs. Officially, the SHU was built to house the worst of the worst: gang shot callers, killers, escape artists. In reality, hundreds ended up there for reasons far murkier: alleged affiliations, anonymous tips, or refusing to debrief against their peers. The longer they stayed, the more invisible they became. It's in this shadow world that our investigation begins. Over the course of months, a team of journalists, lawyers, and family members pieced together letters, legal filings, and scraps of photographs to understand how Pelican Bay's solitary unit became the template for supermax prisons nationwide. What they found was not just harsh conditions but a system of control so total it produced its own myths. Whispers of secret rooms, clandestine experiments, and a psychological breaking point, used as a management tool. One winter morning, we sat in a cramped office in Crescent City leafing through a stack of kites, tiny folded notes smuggled out of the SHU. The handwriting slanted and uneven, some written with pencils worn down to nubs. Haven't touched another human being in 8 years. Lights never off. Talk to the wall so I don't forget my voice. The words were stark, but it was the time stamps that chilled us. Some dated back to the mid-1990s, others as recent as last month. This wasn't a relic of the past, it was ongoing. The first person willing to speak on camera was Marcus Hill, a former inmate who'd spent 12 years in Pelican Bay's SHU. We met him in a halfway house in Oakland, his hands trembling slightly as he set down his coffee. "You learn to count your steps," he said. 6 paces forward, 6 paces back. That's your whole day. You stop counting, you start to drift. Drift too far and you don't come back. His voice cracked. People think solitary is quiet. It's not. It's screaming, metal doors slamming, your own heartbeat in your ears. According to court records, Marcus had been validated as a gang associate based on a drawing of an Aztec warrior found in his cell. He never had a disciplinary write-up for violence inside. Yet he spent more than a decade in a windowless box the size of a parking space. After a while, he said, the cell starts talking back. Family members of SHU prisoners described similar deterioration. A mother from Fresno recounted how her son's letters changed over time, from neat script to erratic scrawls. He stopped asking about home. He started asking if I was real. These testimonies echoed findings from psychologists. Sensory deprivation, extreme isolation, and indefinite terms combined to produce anxiety, paranoia, and hallucinations. But Pelican Bay's secrecy meant few outsiders ever saw it. Tours were rare. Photographs heavily restricted. The public image remained that of a necessary tool to control the state's most dangerous inmates. Inside, however, a paper trail told another story. Through California's Public Records Act, our team obtained maintenance logs showing decades-old light fixtures never turned off, ventilation systems that kept cells in perpetual chill, and disciplinary reviews that recycled vague allegations to extend SHU terms year after year. A pivotal moment came when an anonymous envelope arrived at our office. Inside were 2 photocopied schematics of the SHU and a note, "Look behind the infirmary." The diagram showed an unmarked chamber adjacent to a shower area. No label, no official designation. Was it simply storage or something else? The whistleblower's handwriting was precise, almost mechanical. On the bottom corner, a date, November 3, 2010. Next to it, 3 words, "They call it blue." That phrase stuck with us. Blue could mean the color of the walls, the tint of CCTV screens, or perhaps a code name. We couldn't know for sure, but the note added fuel to our investigation. Former staff we interviewed spoke in guarded terms. "The SHU is a world unto itself," one retired officer said. "You don't ask questions. You just do your rounds." Another recalled a cold room used for debriefings. When pressed, he refused to elaborate. At the same time, a quiet resistance was forming inside the prison. In 2011, dozens of SHU inmates began coordinated hunger strikes to protest indefinite solitary. They demanded basic improvements: warm clothing, educational materials, one phone call a week. These may sound small, but in the SHU they were seismic. The strikes grew, first hundreds, then thousands, spreading to other California prisons. Pelican Bay became the epicenter of a movement that blurred the line between inmates and human rights activists. Chapter 1 of our story closes not with a single act of violence but with a dawning realization. Solitary confinement at Pelican Bay was not merely a punishment but a system of power with its own internal logic, one that shaped both prisoners and staff. As Marcus Hill told us, "You're not just locking people up. You're locking up a piece of yourself too." On a foggy evening, we stood outside the prison gates, news vans parked in a row, protest signs fluttering. Above us a guard tower blinked its red warning light. Through the chain-link fence the SHU block loomed, featureless and silent. But inside those walls, hundreds of men were pacing their 6 steps back and forth in a soundproof world. And then our phone buzzed, a new message from an unlisted number. It contained a single image, a grainy blue CCTV frame of the unmarked chamber behind the infirmary. Below it, a caption, "Next one coming soon." It was the clue that would launch the next phase of our investigation, and reveal just how deep the dark secrets of Pelican Bay's solitary confinement really went. The Blue Room. The anonymous CCTV frame sat glowing on Catherine Hemming's laptop screen, bathing the tiny hotel room in ghost blue light. She had been following Pelican Bay's SHU for years, but this was the first tangible proof of something beyond the official maps. An unmarked chamber, a shadow behind the infirmary. The caption, "Next one coming soon," was both a promise and a threat. She sent the image to Miguel Ray, the journalist who had turned Marcus Hill's testimony into front-page headlines. Minutes later her phone buzzed. "I've seen this place," Ray whispered. "When I was touring with the Oversight Committee in 2014, a door at the end of the hall was locked. A guard called it the Blue Room as a joke. They told us it was storage." He paused. "It didn't smell like storage." Ray was in Los Angeles, preparing a long-form feature on California's prison system. Hemming told him to come north. "If this is real, it changes everything," she said. "It's not just solitary confinement, it's something they've kept completely off the books." Inside Pelican Bay, Marcus Hill's old cell had a new occupant, a 29-year-old named Andre Velasquez. Andre had been validated as a gang affiliate after guards found a drawing of a chess piece in his journal. He had no idea that outside, his letters were becoming evidence in a class action suit. All he knew was that the food came through a slot, the light never went off, and rumors about the Blue Room kept him awake at night. "They take you there if you file too many grievances," another inmate had tapped through the pipes. "They'll freeze you out." Andre started keeping a journal on the back of old grievance forms. He wrote about the humming of the vent, the way the cold crept into his bones at night, the hollow metallic taste in the water. He wrote down names of guards who walked past, times when he heard chains clanking at odd hours. He slid the pages into envelopes and mailed them to his sister. She in turn mailed them to Hemming. When the envelopes arrived, Hemming laid the pages out across her motel bed. Each detail, each timestamp was another puzzle piece. She mapped them against the schematics from the whistleblower. Patterns emerged: sudden temperature drops, transfers to medical, inmates returned pale and shaking. Whatever the Blue Room was, it wasn't a figment of rumor. The first crack in the official wall came from a retired maintenance worker named Ellis Crane. He agreed to meet Hemming and Ray at a truck stop outside Eureka, sitting at a corner booth under buzzing neon. He looked like any aging handyman: work boots, weathered hands, a shy smile. But when they showed him the CCTV still, his face drained. "That's it," he said. "That's the overflow chamber." Crane explained that during construction in the late 1980s, contractors added a sealed utility space behind the infirmary to house water heaters and ventilation controls. Over time, he said, they repurposed it. He'd been ordered to install a secondary door with a keypad lock. "They said it was for high-risk medical isolation," he murmured. "But I never saw a doctor in there." Ray asked if he'd ever been inside. Crane hesitated. "Once. To fix a leak. 2 guards stood behind me the whole time. There was a drain in the middle of the floor and hooks on the wall. Blue tiles. Cold as a meat locker." He shivered at the memory. "I didn't go back." Hemming's mind raced. Hooks, drain, blue tiles, it matched stories whispered by inmates for years. She thanked Crane and asked if he'd testify. He shook his head. "I like breathing," he said softly. But he handed her a folded maintenance order. In the margin someone had scrawled "BR recalibrate boiler." It was dated just days before Andre Velasquez reported an unexplained cold water extraction in his journal. Back at the prison, Lieutenant Karen McAllister was watching her world collapse. After the first hunger strikes, she tried to reform things quietly. Now the department had circled wagons, assigning Pierce and his allies to security reviews. She noticed certain files disappearing from the system, keycards deactivated, logs altered. And she noticed something else: transfers to the infirmary were up. Medical isolation, the note said. But she'd been there. The infirmary had only 2 rooms. One night, she followed a pair of officers pushing a gurney down the back hallway. They stopped at the unmarked door. A keypad beeped, the door opened, and a gust of icy air spilled out. She caught a glimpse of blue tiles, a steel drain. Then one of the officers turned and saw her. "You lost, Lieutenant?" he asked. She forced a smile. "Just checking the fire exits." She walked away, heart hammering. They knew she knew. Hemming and Ray built their case in secret. They had Marcus Hill's testimony, Andre's journal pages, Crane's maintenance order, and the anonymous CCTV still. But to convince a judge they needed one more thing: direct evidence that inmates were being held in the Blue Room in violation of policy. Through a network of family members, they reached a former nurse named Leah Chin who had worked in Pelican Bay's infirmary. She described being ordered to draw blood from inmates who weren't on her roster, and to sign blank medical forms. When she asked where the patients were housed, a supervisor told her, "Don't worry about it." She remembered the sound of metal doors closing somewhere beyond the infirmary. "It was colder back there," she said. "Like a freezer." Leah agreed to provide a sworn statement under a pseudonym. She faxed Hemming copies of internal memos stamped "confidential." One memo referenced BR overflow capacity and thermal recalibration. Another listed debriefing protocol, level blue. Hemming felt a chill. This wasn't just an extra room. It was a program. As the evidence mounted, so did the danger. Hemming noticed a dark SUV idling near her motel at night. Ray's email was hacked. Files vanished from his cloud drive. Marcus Hill received a letter marked "Return to Sender," even though he hadn't sent one. Inside was a photograph of his halfway house with a red X over the door. Yet the leaks from inside kept coming. One evening, Hemming returned to her room to find another envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a flash drive. It contained grainy video clips from a security camera, the same angle as the still she'd received before. In the clips, shackled inmates were led into the Blue Room, guards standing by. The sound was muted, but the blue tile gleamed under harsh light. Timestamps ran from 2018 to just 2 months ago. Ray watched the footage with his head in his hands. "This is it," he said. "This is the smoking gun." Hemming nodded. "If we release it too soon, they'll shut it down and disappear the evidence," she said. "We need a court order first." Inside Pelican Bay, Andre Velasquez sensed something was coming. The guards were tense, whispering on the tier. One night he heard chains dragging and a muffled shout from down the hall. Then silence. In the morning, a neighboring cell was empty. His heart pounded. He began scratching a message into the paint: "They take us to the Blue Room." He didn't know if anyone would ever see it. Karen McAllister was at a breaking point. She joined corrections believing she could make a difference. Now she was an accessory to a system she barely recognized. She emailed Hemming from a burner account, "I can get you inside." It was the lifeline Hemming had been waiting for. The plan was simple on paper. McAllister would use her credentials to escort Hemming and Ray as consultants for a legal inspection. Once inside, they'd document the Blue Room. In reality, it was a high-risk gamble. If caught, McAllister could be fired or worse. Hemming and Ray could be arrested for trespassing on state property. But without direct evidence, their case might die in court. They set the date for a foggy Thursday in November. Hemming and Ray arrived at the prison gates in plain suits, carrying clipboards. McAllister met them with a brittle smile. "Act like you belong," she murmured. They passed through metal detectors, signed visitor logs, and walked the echoing corridors. Guards eyed them suspiciously. McAllister led them down a side hall toward the infirmary. At the end of the corridor was the unmarked door. The keypad beeped. The door swung open. Cold air washed over them. Inside, blue tiles glistened under harsh lights. A steel drain sat in the center of the floor. Hooks lined the walls. A security camera blinked in the corner. Ray lifted his phone to snap a photo, and froze. On the far wall, above a stainless counter, hung a clipboard with today's date. Next to it was a list of names. Andre Velasquez was one of them. Before they could react, footsteps echoed behind them. A voice barked, "What are you doing in here?" McAllister's face went pale. Two uniformed officers stepped into the doorway, blocking the exit. Hemming's heart hammered. They had finally found the blue room, but now they were trapped inside it. Exposure. For a heartbeat, the three of them stood frozen in the blue room. Catherine Hemming clutching her clipboard, Miguel Ray with his phone half raised, Karen McAllister trembling between them, while two uniformed officers filled the doorway. Cold air pooled around their ankles. The bluish light made everyone's skin look pale. "Inspection's over," one officer said flatly. "You're in a restricted area." McAllister forced a smile. "Legal consultants," she said, waving her badge. "They're with me." But her voice wavered. She could feel the camera above them blinking red, recording everything. The taller officer stepped closer. "Then you know you're not cleared for this section." He eyed Hemming and Ray. "Phones? Hand them over." Ray's thumb hovered over the send button. He'd snapped 2 photos of the room, the hooks, the drain, the clipboard with Andre Velasquez's name. If he could just get them out before the officers confiscated his phone, the evidence would live. Hemming shifted, blocking the view of his screen. "We're attorneys working under a federal court order," she said calmly. "Interfering with us is a violation of that order." She didn't mention the order was only for infirmary records, not access to hidden chambers. McAllister drew a breath. "They're here lawfully," she said more firmly. "If you have a problem, call the warden." She stepped between the officers and the journalists. "Or is there a reason you don't want us to see what's in this room?" The shorter officer's jaw tightened. "Stay here." He turned and left. The taller one lingered a moment, then followed. Their boots echoed down the hall. The door clanged shut. Ray exhaled. "We have maybe 30 seconds. He hit send, attaching the images to a secure cloud. "Done." Hemming's pulse thudded in her ears. "We need to get out before they come back with backup." McAllister nodded. "Follow me." They hurried down the corridor toward a side exit McAllister knew from her rounds. As they reached the Sally port, an alarm began to wail somewhere deeper in the prison, a rising klaxon that set everyone on edge. "They know," McAllister muttered. At the outer gate, a guard stopped them. "Lockdown," he barked. "No one leaves." His radio crackled with frantic chatter. Hemming held out her papers. "Federal order," she said again, this time louder. "If you detain us without cause, the judge will hear about it before lunch." The guard hesitated. Through the fence behind him, news vans were lined up on the road. Protesters chanted, cameras rolling. He glanced at the paperwork, at the cameras, and at the three of them. Finally he opened the gate. "Go," he said. "Now." They walked fast, not running, across the gravel lot. When they reached Ray's car, Hemming's knees gave out. She sat on the curb, shaking. "We have it," she whispered. "We finally have it." Within hours, the images from Ray's phone were mirrored on servers across the country. They showed the blue room in crisp detail: blue-tiled walls, stainless drain, hooks, a clipboard with a list of names. The timestamp matched the day's date. It was incontrovertible proof of an off-books chamber being used on current inmates. Ray's editor cleared a special edition of their investigative series. At dawn, the headline hit every major news feed: Pelican Bay's secret blue room revealed, new evidence of hidden confinement program. Cable anchors repeated the phrase blue room like a mantra. Legislators demanded answers. Civil rights groups filed emergency motions. McAllister resigned publicly, handing over her statement to Hemming. "The blue room exists," it read. "It has been used to hold inmates in conditions not authorized by any policy I have seen. I could not continue to be part of it." Her letter became the opening paragraph of Ray's article. Andre Velasquez's sister called Hemming in tears. "They moved him," she said, "out of the SHU. To a hospital in Sacramento." For the first time in years, Andre saw a sky without bars. The Department of Corrections initially denied everything. A spokesperson called the Blue Room a routine maintenance area, and claimed the images were misinterpreted. But as more insiders came forward, nurses, maintenance workers, even a former warden, the official story crumbled. Someone leaked internal memos referencing level blue debriefing protocol. Another sent a training manual page showing a diagram of the room labeled Behavioral Reset Chamber. Public outrage was immediate. Editorials compared Pelican Bay to Cold War black sites. A U.S. senator requested a federal investigation. The governor announced an independent commission. For Hemming, the victory was bittersweet. She had spent years fighting for transparency, but exposing the Blue Room meant putting McAllister and others at risk. Anonymous threats flooded her inbox. One message read simply, "You'll wish you'd stayed out." She forwarded the threats to the FBI and kept working. "Sunlight is protection," she told Ray. "We have to keep the story moving faster than they can retaliate." Weeks later, the first hearing opened in federal court. Von Dorch's case had once been the emblem of Pelican Bay's abuses. Now Andre Velasquez stood as the lead plaintiff in a new class action. Hemming argued that the Blue Room was an unconstitutional extension of solitary confinement, a covert punishment with no oversight. The courtroom was packed. On the prosecution table lay enlarged photographs of the room. One showed a thermometer reading 49 degrees Fahrenheit. Another showed chains coiled near the drain. "This is not storage," Hemming told the judge. "This is a program designed to break human beings." Reporters scribbled. Cameras clicked. In the gallery, McAllister sat with her head bowed. After the hearing, Ray filed his story with a closing paragraph that would go viral. They called it Level Blue. But behind the euphemism was a room no one was supposed to see. Now the public has seen it. Back in Crescent City, the prison gates were quiet. Protesters had gone home. A winter fog rolled over the yard. In a small cell far from the Blue Room, Andre Velasquez sat by a window, a real window, in a medical ward. He picked up a pen and began to write a letter. "I don't know how this ends," he wrote. "But for the first time, I believe someone is listening." Hemming received the letter a week later. She tacked it above her desk next to Marcus Hill's photo. Beneath it she pinned a copy of the anonymous CCTV still, the image that had started everything. One night, while she was packing up her files, her phone buzzed. A new email from an unfamiliar address contained a single attachment, a grainy CCTV frame of another unmarked room, this one labeled Level Red. No caption. Just a date from 5 years ago. Hemming stared at the screen. "There's always another door," she murmured. She walked to the window and looked out at the streetlights. She thought of the men still pacing their 6 steps in cells around the country. She thought of McAllister living under a pseudonym now. She thought of Marcus Hill's warning, "You're not just locking people up. You're locking up a piece of yourself too." Then she opened a new file on her laptop and typed a headline, "Inside Pelican Bay Prison, Level Red." Below it she wrote a note to Miguel Ray, "If you thought blue was bad, wait until you see this." Outside, the city hummed with ordinary life. Inside her office, the glow of the screen painted everything blue.